Hey everybody, this episode of Supply Shock is powered by Core. You're going to hear a lot more about them later in this episode, but first, a word from our sponsors.
Core is the Bitcoin consumer chain. Stake your Bitcoin, explore Bitcoin DeFi, and earn rewards today. Visit stake.coredao.org/blockworks. You'll hear more about them later in the episode.
Hey everybody, welcome to Supply Shock. I'm your host, Pete Rizzo, the Bitcoin historian on X. Today's episode is a special news roundup live from the Digital Asset Summit in New York. We've got a couple great guests here. Casey Wagner, senior reporter for Blockworks, and Ben Strack, senior reporter for Blockworks, both writers for the great Forward Guidance newsletter. Go to blockworks.co/newsletters. You can download and get the subscriptions for all those newsletters and news. Price of Bitcoin right now, $83,000 across exchanges. Let's dive into the news. Obviously, a lot going on here at the conference. One of the big themes, I think, is politics here now in Bitcoin and crypto. Ben, let's start with you. What are you seeing from some of the political folks here who are engaging with the community?
Yeah, I think the people we're talking to, it's still about, after the executive order for the strategic Bitcoin reserve, we're now waiting on seeing about the legislation that Cynthia Lummis has floated to kind of codify that. And I think that is, one of the next catalysts people are waiting for. But obviously there's other legislation maybe taking priority to that with stablecoins and market structure.
Casey, maybe we'll go over to you. Politics, the big subject here. Obviously a lot of announcements. Are there more things coming down the pipeline that people are talking about in the future? Maybe market structure. We mentioned the SBR. We can dig into that in a little bit. But are there things kind of on the horizon that are starting to be discussed here at the Digital Asset Summit?
Yeah, I think so. We heard yesterday from Ro Khanna, the Democrat from California. He was our first congressional speaker of the conference. Today we'll have Tom Emmer, obviously a Republican. Later we'll have Wiley Nickel, who is an ex-congressman, Democrat, also running for Senate, I believe.
North Carolina, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And I think the big theme is when we're getting a lot of this stuff. I know last session we had stablecoin bills that made it decently far, market structure bills that made it very far, but nothing actually made it over the finish line. Trump has said he wants a stablecoin bill on his desk by August. Yesterday we heard from Bo Hines, who is the director of the President's Working Group on Digital Assets. Quite a mouthful there. Yeah. He thinks the stablecoin bill might come in the next 2 months, so a little bit sooner. To Ben's point, market structure is definitely next. I also think we'll start to see some Bitcoin reserve legislation. Right. I mean, we obviously had the executive order that said that the government can no longer sell seized Bitcoin. We'll hold on to those assets. In terms of buying more, though.
Well, Bo Hines yesterday at this very podcast stage talking about the U.S. wanting to acquire as much Bitcoin. Obviously, that has to become law, right? Executive order has kind of passed. Now we're in the legislative meet. We've seen 2 bills, one in the House, one in the Senate. I think a total of 12 co-sponsors. Is there a belief maybe on the floor, Ben, that there is going to be a larger political appetite for something like America buying 1 million Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think, Cynthia Lummis had talked about maybe the states beating the federal government to something like that. It seemed the tone has changed a little bit that, after the executive order and her reintroducing the law that we could get that. And obviously she's putting specifics to it. You mentioned the 1 million Bitcoin, so up to 200,000 per year for 5 years, and her going into, the specifics of how they would do it in a budget neutral way, like they mentioned the executive order with, repricing their gold reserves and doing that sort of thing. So having those specifics, I think, can help people
but are
wrap
there different ideas that are competing here, right, other than the Cynthia Lummis bill, which is very specific, right? It talks about repricing America's gold holdings, using that and invest. Is there a larger competition of ideas, or is there support building for the Bitcoin Act, Casey?
I would argue Lummis doesn't have a terrible amount of support.
Oh, okay. Wow.
I do think that we've seen bipartisan support on stablecoin legislation. We've seen bipartisan support on market structure.
Can you put a number on that? Like, what's the difference between the 12 SBR?
Yeah. The IRS CRA, the resolution that passed last week that had 79 Democrats in the House that supported it, and that was a congressional resolution to overturn IRS guidelines that would basically treat wallets and software providers as brokers in terms of reporting requirements. Obviously, that was a big issue for the industry. The argument is these people oftentimes don't even have access to the data that the IRS was requesting. So that was an example of a lot of Democratic support. The Genius Act, the markup in the Senate.
Some contention with Elizabeth Warren, of
there
course.
was some contention, but I mean, in the end, they got 6 or 7 Democrat senators voted to move it out of committee. I think with Lummis's Strategic Bitcoin Reserve Act, which she actually introduced at the Bitcoin conference last year with Trump, I just don't know if I see as much Democratic support.
Well, I think I get the sense that from the Democratic position, their big, kind of point of populist contention is this idea that the government shouldn't be buying Bitcoin, that this is a misallocation of funds. You see this with, the bills kind of put in place against meme coins. So it does seem like the SBR of the kind of Bitcoin and crypto bills lies more on sort of this fissure point, which is that maybe we don't want public money going to invest in Bitcoin and crypto. So maybe that enriches kind of the oligarchs, the wealthy Silicon Valley people that the Democrats, maybe are less aligned with. So how do you see that partisan nature? Is the SBR maybe more at risk?
I think that we're seeing Republicans, and we're seeing this even from the Trump administration, use language that is really trying to get the message across that this wouldn't be taxpayer money. Budget neutral is the word we've seen from Bo Hines and David Sachs. Cynthia Lummis, like Ben said, her idea is to revalue the gold. She says our gold reserves are worth a lot more. Let's take that money. It wouldn't be taxpayer money. Buy Bitcoin. I think that there is an idea on the Republican side that to get support, it would have to be very budget neutral. And I think we're starting to see that in the language that they're using.
Well, there were polls, like even just this weekend, right, finding that the majority of Americans don't want America to be using public funds to buy Bitcoin. Do you get the sense that that is sort of impacting the conversation at all? Or?
I do. Yeah, I definitely do. I think that like I said, I think the Republicans are really trying to push this budget neutral language because they're trying to get the message across that this would not be taxpayer money. Because I do think that would be very, very unpopular. So,
and we, David Sachs tweeting earlier this month of just, even just holding the Bitcoin that the U.S. has sold over the last decade, which I think he estimated at 195,000 for proceeds of 360 million. I think that would be worth roughly 17 billion.
Yeah, right.
So I think when people see numbers like that, it does kind of get them more interested in learning more about those budget neutral strategies.
Ro Khanna obviously here, trying, I think, build himself as the vanguard for Democratic support. I'm curious, did he say anything about the SBR? Or was that
he did not?
No, okay,
he does. So he represents parts of the Bay Area in California. So definitely, tech focused. There's a crypto scene out there. So he definitely knows his audience. I think a lot of the Democrats that are becoming a little bit more pro-crypto in their messaging are really focusing on the idea of crypto being a good entry point for financial inclusion. We see that a lot in with a lot of the Democrats that have expressed any support. Cynthia Lummis works very closely with Kristen Gillibrand from New York. A big focus for her is, access to the banking system, getting people the ability to, democratize finance. I think that that's really kind of where the Democrats are coming from. I've not really heard a lot of comments on the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve from the Democrat side, which again is why I think that they're going to face a bigger hurdle with that in Congress than with some of the stablecoin stuff.
Let's turn the page on the subject. We're at Digital Asset Summit in New York. Obviously, a lot of name tags, badges with some big institutions. I've seen Bank of America, HSBC, some names that maybe in the past would be more reluctant to appear here. Ben, what have you seen from the incumbents, the presence from banks, kind of large financial institutions here at the conference?
Yeah, I think it was interesting. We heard from Crucible founder Meltem Demir's earlier, kind of saying a lot of these institutions are mercenaries, not missionaries.
Right, yeah.
Here
Meltem
to make Meltem. But yeah, no, they're out. They've been here for years, but I think with the conversation progressing and regulation coming, they're even more interested.
Are they mostly on stage or in the audience? Or Casey, what are you seeing from the incumbents? Is there still a reticence to maybe be out public in front and center?
No, I think they're both. I mean, we're in the middle of the expo hall right now. I mean, there are people talking. I sat next to, at the speaker dinner last night, I sat next to someone from JP Morgan, which maybe they wouldn't have been at a crypto conference not that long ago. I do think that there's an interest from institutions now looking to what digital assets and crypto can do beyond just an investment or beyond a store of value. They're looking into tokenization, settlements. I think we're really starting to see a shift in the conversation in terms of use cases.
HODLing isn't enough anymore. Bitcoin is evolving on Core, unlocking yield, utility, and a thriving DeFi ecosystem. With over 250 dApps and nearly $1 billion in total value locked, Bitcoin DeFi is growing fast. Hundreds of thousands of users are already staking, lending, and building on Core's high-speed, low-fee rails. Now it's your turn. Whether you're a user or a builder, the Core Ignition program rewards you for participating in Bitcoin's next evolution. Unlock your Bitcoin and use Core. Start earning with Ignition today at ignition.coredao.org/blockworks. For the past decade, Ledger has been the global leader in digital asset security, trusted to secure more than 20% of the world's crypto assets. Celebrating 10 years of innovation, Ledger is making digital ownership more secure and accessible with their latest products, Ledger Stacks and Ledger Flex. These wallets feature the world's first secure touchscreens, simplifying your digital transactions while ensuring uncompromising security through Ledger's secure chip and proprietary OS. Plus, with the Ledger Security Key app, you can say goodbye to traditional passwords and step up your digital protection. Ready to protect your assets? Choose the most trusted name in hardware wallets, Ledger, and take control of your digital security today at ledger.com. Unlock the power of your Bitcoin with Ledn. For over 6 years, Ledn has helped thousands HODL their Bitcoin while accessing liquidity, focusing on transparency, security, and trust. Learn what your Bitcoin can do for you and see why so many clients trust Ledn. Visit ledn.io to learn more.
Well, speaking for myself personally, I've seen kind of the Wall Street banks in and around the industry since 2014, 15, when there was talks that, they would own and operate all the blockchain networks, right? That was kind of a big narrative back in the day that maybe you'd see banks kind of run some of these, you wouldn't maybe have a public blockchain like an Ethereum or Solana. You would have a private blockchain that was kind of owned and operated by a BNY Mellon or a Bank of America or a JP Morgan or a BlackRock. Is there a warming to this idea that they might have to give up some of the financial controls that they're accustomed to as a part of this conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. At a roundtable last week, Robbie Mitchnick, who's the head of digital assets at BlackRock, was talking about just kind of the failures of private blockchain exploration for
it was a moment,
Right. A company like BlackRock, largest asset manager in the world, with their tokenized money market funds, and everyone's kind of seeing how those and stablecoins can be used. We heard David Mercer, the CEO of LMAX Digital, on the stage yesterday talking about him dealing with the 40 largest banks in the world, and he thinks half of them are going to be involved in digital assets.
But there must be a way to make money here, right, Casey? That's why they're here.
Yeah, I spoke with a few people at some big banks. I won't out anyone directly, but I do think that there's a concern from the banking side that these public blockchains are ready. I've heard are they mature enough is kind of the question that's being asked in a lot of these rooms.
Well, certainly the Bitcoin ETFs, I would imagine, maybe have calmed some concerns. They've been live for a year now. You've seen BlackRock, one of the largest holders now of Bitcoin in the world. Obviously, it seems like there's a lot of enthusiasm for financial products of the sort, Ben.
Yeah, for sure. Most successful ETF launch in history. Saw 40 billion in flows. And yeah, a lot of people looking to get Bitcoin exposure. It's easy to get it through the ETF. We've seen that with sovereign wealth funds jumping in. Abu Dhabi's sovereign wealth fund owning a little over more than 400 million worth of IBIT.
But is there a new kind of maybe we think about the ETFs as a product that now is fully the incumbents are active, involved? I think this year you'll see many more ETFs for many more long tail kind of crypto assets. Is there an idea that there's a next product set that, okay, this is where this expands to, whether it's lending or trading or something like that, where the incumbents kind of broadly say or see this as the next opportunity, Casey?
I think we'll see more staking, especially in the ETF, ETP space. I think there's still some regulatory questions. There's a lack of clarity. I hate to use that soundbite, but I definitely think that there is. Institutions are, from what I understand, somewhat interested in staking. Everyone wants to make more money.
And that would just be like running validators and getting paid for operating these networks,
and I think that there's some tax implications that are a little bit unclear. Hopefully we'll start to see some clarity on that from the SEC soon, potentially the IRS. I think that could really open the door. In terms of other products, though, I'm curious from Ben too, like what else you're watching or thinking about seeing.
Yeah, I mean, we're hearing about Bitcoin is the first asset that a lot of these allocators look at, and then they go to ETH generally, and then the rest of them. And we've obviously seen a lot of filings from the big firms for Solana, XRP, many other ETFs that the SEC is potentially more comfortable with. We saw CME Group launch Solana Futures.
Right,
So
it's a bit of a sparse reception,
but that's probably a prerequisite to SEC approval. They've talked about a market of significant size and wanting to see that before approving ETFs. And then the future is kind of having these crypto baskets in an ETF wrapper where investors can get
I think one of the
exposure
interesting, dreams that's kind of been around from the industry for a while is this idea, maybe you will log into your Bank of America, your Chase account, and see something like a Bitcoin or, even just a more general crypto wallet. Is that on the table now that something like these bills and things in regulation is coming, or is this still you're going to see a bifurcation of the crypto exchanges? You go to your crypto exchange for your crypto, and you go to your bank for your regular money, and there isn't an intermixing.
Yeah, I mean, I think slowly we'll start to see that. I mean, obviously there was a lot of excitement with the Trump administration from much of the crypto industry. I was at the crypto ball, the inauguration party in DC. But I think in a lot of this excitement, we kind of forget how slowly things can move in Washington. I think that, I will say Trump has only been the president for 70 days?
I think we're still within the first 100 days.
Okay, yeah.
Pretty
So
snugly.
it's very early. We've had executive orders. We've had bills get marked up in Congress. Those are all definitely moving faster than we've ever seen crypto legislation move.
But what do they want to do, right? Do they want to actually push this technology to, the consumer level? Or are you sensing that this is more, they're interested in institutional kind of productization of cryptocurrencies? Because ultimately this is Bitcoin was founded as a peer-to-peer technology that was supposed to empower people for personal transactions and things like that.
I think there is interest on the retail level and the consumer level, but perhaps institutional adoption will come first. But again, with the policy side of it, I think that companies are more optimistic. I think that means more hiring, more resources will be allocated to this if there's an expectation that there will be more regulatory clarity. Why invest in something as a business if you don't think it's going to go anywhere? So I think that from the policy side is definitely influencing hiring, teams, allocation of money, that kind of stuff.
Well, I want to talk, obviously, this podcast, the Bitcoin podcast on a crypto network. There is this natural kind of tension between these communities. Personally, myself appreciated Meltem Demir's kickoff speech yesterday where she talked about some of the malaise in the crypto world, right, where the innovators and builders maybe don't feel like they have accomplished that much and maybe aren't dreaming big enough or innovating as hard as they could. So how do we think about the Bitcoin crypto dynamic that you've seen at this conference?
I think Bitcoin seems pretty dominant here, I would say.
Yeah, for sure.
And like Ben said, it's
unpopularly
kind of the
dominant.
gateway.
And Meltem was saying she showed the charts of the trading volumes in crypto market cap over the last 5 years without Bitcoin and ETH, and
it was flat.
Up and down, but pretty flat. And talking about how growing Bitcoin dominance is a sign of stagnation.
Well, okay, so you were talking about Brad Garlinghouse even on stage, maybe forced to answer a question about Bitcoin in order to kind of build the bipartisanship. How did that moment go down?
Yeah, I haven't been on Twitter to see how the XRP army has responded, but he did say that he is bullish on Bitcoin. He says he owns Bitcoin. He's owned Bitcoin for a very long time. Yeah, I think at an institutional focused event like this, Bitcoin really is, for a long time and probably for the foreseeable future, will kind of be the main focus. I think that, like Ben said, it's Bitcoin and then maybe Ethereum.
But do they get a sense of, this industry is so dominated by narratives. Narratives kind of come and go. The most recent one would have been, meme coins on Solana that, maybe Solana charitably to Steelman. Their argument, they found a way to do cheap, fast blockchain transactions. They got a lot of retail involved. It does seem odd to me that there isn't an optimism or a discussion about this, or more of that isn't. There's not more excitement about that, right? I don't know. That's something. There's some activity there, but it does feel like it's hard to know where to go from there. At least in some of my conversations with people in the crypto side of the space, there does kind of feel like they're at a little bit of a crossroads where they're looking for some direction in terms of how to build or how to think about building.
I think that there is, on the institutional side, still just a really big focus on Bitcoin, especially like as an investable asset versus a usable asset, and kind of thinking on building on top of Bitcoin what it could do versus just holding it.
And there's still just the tension between the narrative of Bitcoin. You know, it's big asset managers are educating clients of this is a digital gold,
Right.
Obviously global, scarce, but then it doesn't always trade that way, and it's trading as a risk on asset a lot of times, and so that gives institutions some pause and forces them to kind of figure out if they want to hold it, what it's going to be doing.
I guess the larger question is like, what is the narrative in the crypto sector that you see now, and maybe how does that
around
compare?
Bitcoin specifically?
Well, Bitcoin I think has Bitcoin has a very consistent narrative, right? And it's been around since 2009. Nobody owns it, nobody operates it, nobody controls it, nobody has a controlling stake. It's not innovating at a terribly rapid pace where there's software changes very often. The crypto sector does seem like it's gone through iterations. There was in 2021 it was all about NFTs, it was all about Ethereum, it was all about DeFi. Again, now I think there's been maybe a frustration with the lack of products that are maybe reaching real people that people are using.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I hear a lot. There's a lot of L1s that I will not name names, but maybe are not doing as much. And I definitely think, again, I mean, Digital Asset Summit specifically is a little bit less technical than, permissionless or other Blockworks events where you might have more of a focus on L2s or what.
Well, I guess you get the sense that in terms of this kind of, there's this idea of an L1, right? This idea that, you'll need to acquire an asset in order to power a set of applications. That seems like that's still a pretty dominant idea in the space, even though people are building L2s and things like that. Is there competition for it to be like the crypto L1 that operates stable coins, or like how do people think about that?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing that now.
Okay.
I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, speaking in the present at this event, conversations I've had, I don't think they're there yet. And I don't even think that institutions are thinking that far ahead at this point.
The only thing better than stacking sats is staking them. With Core's self-custodial Bitcoin staking, you can earn yield on your BTC without ever giving up custody, no new trust assumptions, no counterparties, and no slashing risk. Still your keys, still your coins, now your yield. Here's how it works. Lock your Bitcoin on the Bitcoin network. Help elect a Core validator and start earning Core rewards, passively, securely, and without risk to your principal. And with dual staking, you can boost rewards by staking Core tokens alongside your Bitcoin. Institutions can also tap into Bitcoin at scale with top custodians. Don't let your Bitcoin sit idle, put it to work. Visit stake.core.dao/blockworks to start staking today. For the past decade, Ledger has been the global leader in digital asset security, trusted to secure more than 20% of the world's crypto assets. Celebrating 10 years of innovation, Ledger is making digital ownership more secure and accessible with their latest products, Ledger Stacks and Ledger Flex. These wallets feature the world's first secure touchscreens, simplifying your digital transactions while ensuring uncompromising security through Ledger's secure chip and proprietary OS. Plus, with the Ledger Security Key app, you can say goodbye to traditional passwords and step up your digital protection. Ready to protect your assets? Choose the most trusted name in hardware wallets, Ledger, and take control of your digital security today at ledger.com. If you've been around Bitcoin for long enough, you've heard the term HODL and the name Ledn. Ledn has been the go-to specialist in Bitcoin lending for over 6 years. Ledn helps you unlock the liquidity of your BTC, allowing you to HODL while still accessing the wealth of your Bitcoin. Ledn has been battle-tested with a focus on transparency, security, and trust. This has allowed them to build a proven track record of client success and security, helping tens of thousands of clients harness the value of their digital assets with confidence and peace of mind. Learn for yourself why so many clients trust Ledn by checking out Ledn's Trustpilot or their reviews on social media. And to learn more about what your Bitcoin can do for you, check out Ledn.io.
Well, I think within the crypto sector, right, you've seen the major exchanges are all largely building Ethereum L2s, right? So that's something where, to the extent that the industry is active and sort of trying to push things forward, Base, obviously, a really popular, layer to do applications. I think you'll probably see exchanges kind of move into that space. Maybe wouldn't be too far-fetched to think that some of the banks are kind of paying attention to how the crypto exchanges are making money, because right now they are the big companies, right? Coinbase is public, but I think very quickly, and maybe the end of this year, you're going to see a whole new slew of public companies. Is that a discussion here about who's next? Who's the next Coinbase? What's the next sector that might be like the public miners? Casey, Ben?
Ben speaks a lot to miners that are already publicly traded. I mean, are there any that you've seen that you think might, I don't want to get too into speculation, but what's the next IPO?
Well, I think people are expecting the IPO wave, right?
Yeah.
Like post-Trump, right?
Yeah, I think even CoreWeave, who has a partnership with Core Scientific.
They started as a mining company and then moved over to AI, right? Okay.
Yeah, and I think when I was speaking to the portfolio manager at Block, one of the largest blockchain ETFs, he talked about looking at CoreWeave as an allocation going forward, but they're not public yet.
Well, Gemini even, kind of filing discreetly for an IPO. So it seems like this is still at the edges, but it hasn't, because we haven't seen the wave. So I guess the question is, what starts the IPO wave, if there is an IPO wave? Casey?
I mean, I think a more favorable SEC certainly helps.
Right.
Coinbase, it took a very long time. It's a very long disclosure process with the SEC. I would imagine that would be easier today than it was when Coinbase did it.
Yeah, I know Anthony Scaramucci, his Galaxy has been looking to go public in the U.S.
Galaxy, like Mike Novogratz's firm? Oh, okay.
They're traded in Canada right now.
Oh, okay, interesting. Yeah.
So
right.
U.S. IPO.
He was, I guess May or June was Anthony Scaramucci's prediction for some of those IPOs. Yeah, I'm talking about Mike Novogratz, not
okay.
Anthony Scaramucci. But yeah, Mike Novogratz was saying Galaxy could go public hopefully in the next few months. They've been waiting for 4 or 5 years. Like you said, the SEC process has been long and tenuous.
Well, a lot of the industry is public, right? And I think that's an opportunity for the incumbents is to help kind of, start this capitalization process. But it sounds like regulation, again, still the hurdle there more than the consumer side. Yeah,
I mean, Coinbase was so frustrated when they were sued by the SEC because they had gone public. They had met with the SEC. They had been through this ridiculous, sorry, I shouldn't say ridiculous, a rigorous process to do their direct listing. And, again, I would imagine it's a lot easier now. So we'll see.
Yeah, and of course, expecting more changes from the SEC. I don't think the even new active chair is in place, right? If that's correct.
No. So Ueda is the acting chair until...
Yeah, I think April or May is the projection for when Paul Atkins could step in. And there was a thought that, the SEC would kind of be waiting for him to come in before doing too much. But we saw them end SAB 121, and we've seen Hester Peirce out with her statements on the SEC website, kind of talking about how they're thinking about classifying different securities and all that.
Well, I guess, you guys are both reporters, your noses to the ground. In terms of the big stories, it feels like we're exiting a period where there was a lot of big stories that were dropping, right? You had the Trump election, you had him kind of installing a cabinet, a lot of, interest in those appointments. The appointments have kind of come and passed. The executive orders have kind of come and passed. Maybe we're not at the IPOs. Maybe the incumbents aren't here. Are we setting ourselves up for kind of a boring Q2, boring Q3? Are people going to have to be patient before the market really kicks back in? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think people will maybe have to be patient. I think there's still plenty on the the tokenization side, which is where a lot of institutions are looking to get involved.
And this is like they're following the BlackRock BUIDL model.
Right.
I haven't really dialed in.
Yeah, BUIDL is the tokenized money market fund.
Can you explain a little bit of like how that works and what it's
so it's a money market fund that is traded on the blockchain. So it allows you to kind of have the utility of a stable coin, but it's
and there's like a public smart contract that like operates this. Okay.
Right. And so that recently hit $1 billion in AUM. Franklin Templeton also has a version of it that they launched a few years ago with the Benji token. So kind of being a complement to stablecoins in a yield-bearing way. Everyone wants yields, as I think you said on stage yesterday.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
true.
What's the reason behind that? Yeah.
Everyone wants money.
Okay. Where does the yield
Make
come
your money
from?
work.
Where does the yield
Where
come
does
from?
the yield come from? More people should be asking that.
Yeah, that's the big question.
Be aware when they
Yeah.
promise you
Usually
ridiculous
you are
yields.
Usually you are the yield in
Yes,
some way. That's the
yes.
unfortunate.
Well, I also like in terms of like price catalysts, I think that the macro scene is really important. Tariffs obviously
Okay,
have really
yeah.
impacted stocks. We have an FOMC decision coming out in a couple hours today. I think that that's pretty much priced in. We know that there will not be changing interest rates. But I do think that Bitcoin, I mean, the correlation, the actual correlation between Bitcoin and the NASDAQ is pretty high right now. It's trading like a risk-on asset, similar to a tech stock. I don't think stocks have bottomed. I will not comment necessarily on Bitcoin, but I do think that those narratives are really impacting crypto a lot, maybe more than people want to admit.
Absolutely.
And these narratives just being that essentially Trump has to take action to kind of reboot the economy, maybe make some hard choices. Is that the narrative?
Yeah, I mean, so the fear of tariffs is really weighing on consumers. We know consumer sentiment is very low. Stocks,
I'll plead ignorance on that. I'll be honest. Before 6 months ago, I had very little idea of what a tariff was, and
tax.
Yeah. Well, I understand
Generally.
generally, but the fear here is that consumer prices will rise,
Yes.
as the economy will slow down.
Yes, and we did see a lot of companies increasing inventories in like January, early February before tariffs came into effect, which potentially could insulate consumers from seeing higher prices immediately. If they have the supply, they don't need to buy more at a higher price. There was a question of whether we would see a Trump put, which is kind of just a fancy way of saying, like, will Trump come in and try to save stocks? He has said he won't. So that, fear is kind of there. If the economy and stocks continue to fall based on this tariff news, will he walk back the tariffs? He says no.
And we were hearing from Bitwise CIO Matt Hogan yesterday about whether he still thinks his prediction of 200,000 for Bitcoin by the end of the year is achievable, and he says yes. The
Everybody's sticking to their
caveat
guns
being
right now.
What was his
the caveat
20
being a recession, which would put pressure on risk-on assets. We've talked about the Bitcoin trading like a risk-on asset, even though its promise of digital gold being down 25% when
A lot of
its
Bitcoiners
high-
are frustrated by this.
when gold was hitting its new record high at 3,000 an ounce.
What was Matt's 2024 Bitcoin prediction?
That's a good question. I think he pretty much called it right with hitting
What did
hitting
it
six
close
figures.
2024 around?
What did Bitcoin close
Yeah,
at?
like
I believe it
100.
was in the low 90s. I believe,
Okay.
yeah, 93,000 or something.
And the
like that.
2024 peak was
The 2024 peak would have been a little bit over 100, but
Okay.
not 110.
okay.
Yeah,
It gets fuzzy for me.
the
these
109
days.
was
Yeah,
I
that's
think
probably
January 20th or
Fairly
so.
close to what I think 100K was
Yeah.
a general estimate. For
Yeah, and clearly there's just he talks about the structural mismatch of supply and demand. We had Bitcoin ETFs buying they bought 500,000 Bitcoin last year. Corporations buying 250,000 or so. Matt Hogan talks about expecting the same thing in 2025.
Well, that did lead me to the next subject, which is MicroStrategy, everybody's favorite Bitcoin stock, and this idea of corporate adoption on the balance sheet. Have we heard anything from these companies outside of MicroStrategy here? Are there other players kind of in this corporate treasury scene? What's going on in the corporate treasury scene?
Ben actually writes about this more.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of those companies here necessarily, but clearly, ARK Invest's report I think said that corporate adoption of Bitcoin went up 5 times in 2024 from the previous year. Strategy obviously just hit the 500,000 mark roughly.
Just almost a touch on.
Right.
Yeah.
They've slowed down their
We'll see
purchases.
how long Michael stays there. Yeah.
Yeah, but Metaplanet has picked it
Now in
up.
the top 10. Yeah.
Right, and smaller companies like Semler Scientific and
But is there a sense that this could be, we're thinking about whether the big narratives for this year, that this could take off in a way that other people, might want to tap these corporate debt markets the way that Michael Saylor is.
Absolutely, and I think it's a lot of it is going to be too a fear of missing out. We've seen if the U.S. starts, we've seen their commitment to already hold seize Bitcoin. If they start buying Bitcoin, there's going to be investment committees at companies and governments who are saying, Eric Peters said it yesterday from Coinbase Asset Management. They're going to be saying 0 is the wrong number. We need to figure out how to buy some. If the U.S. is going to be holding this, we want in, and we'll stomach some of the volatility and hold this long term, but we don't want to be left out.
There's this meme that BlackRock owns Bitcoin, right? But in reality, they don't, right? They hold it on behalf of the customers, right? There is a reality where BlackRock, from an institutional management side, does start buying Bitcoin, right?
I think, to Ben's point, the strategic Bitcoin reserve would be a real catalyst for that. Should we see the U.S. government actually acquire more Bitcoin and not just hold what we currently have, I think that would really force a lot of companies to take it more seriously than they currently are. Whether that means offering a debt, I don't know.
Well, there is the Bit Bonds proposal, which we want to get into, which is another example, I think, of Michael's influence kind of going up into other parts of the government. But maybe we can end it on a fun note with, is Bitcoin mainstream now, right? Like, you're looking around this conference. You guys have both been veterans of the industry for a few years now. Is the tone, tempo different, or are we still outsiders banging on the gates?
To me, Bitcoin's definitely mainstream. I started reporting on ETFs like 5 years ago, and a lot of people had no idea in that industry what Bitcoin was. Clearly, with the launch last year of those funds, there have been a bunch of headlines about it, and so now everyone is kind of forced to learn about it. And when you see the strategic Bitcoin reserve plan, anyone who is not educated will start getting educated. They won't necessarily adopt, but it's forcing people to learn about it. And I've talked to a bunch of advisors too. There used to be a reputational risk to investing in Bitcoin. You were kind of viewed as an outsider if you were considering that. And now it's
you're just a very rich outsider.
Well, now it's flipped, where there's a reputational risk to not know about Bitcoin. If clients are asking about it and you have been a little stubborn in learning about it, you won't be viewed too favorably because of the returns it's seen over the long horizon. And
are you getting a sense of like how those professionals like are actually like learning about the stuff? Are they getting like hands-on with it? Are they doing workshops? Like, how are they actually getting educated about?
So we've seen a bunch of stats of a large percentage, or a good percentage of advisors owning it themselves, but unable to hold it on behalf of clients for regulatory reasons. So I think a lot of them are comfortable with it. But then when you have firms like BlackRock and Fidelity launching these ETFs, they have huge sales forces that are
Well, you do have your Vanguards. Your Edward Jones, I think, was just out on the news over the weekend. Their CEO, I believe, kind of saying that they don't think they're going to offer it, right? So
yeah, I actually use Vanguard. And on the day of the ETF launch, I tried to buy it. I couldn't buy it.
Oh, okay.
And I called them and I was just like, hey, I have a brokerage account. Are you going to offer any of these Bitcoin ETFs? I didn't even say I was a reporter. I was purely calling as a client. And the woman, it was like a customer sales rep, but she was like, you're the millionth person today to call about this. And I really don't think we're going to. And I she had a statement that she was supposed to read me about, risk and whatever. But yeah, I'm curious if they'll be forced to change that.
Right.
If I think it will come from customers saying that they want to buy it.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Well, obviously the mood a little bit, more subdued. Other than I think I'm the most garishly dressed person I've seen at this conference. So there is a sense maybe that retail isn't here. Obviously, this is a more institutional focused conference. But maybe we can talk about that aspect of the mainstream part of it. Is retail gone? Are they coming back? Where'd they go?
No, I don't think so. To answer your first question about like, is Bitcoin mainstream? I always kind of judge it on like how many people are texting me outside of crypto, like friends and family that have nothing to do with any of this and really even finance, like outside of the financial industry. I'm getting a lot of those texts. And I think a lot of that is obviously Trump talking about it, the executive order. It's on the news. People are seeing the price go up. They are sad that they missed out.
Right.
I do think that that's a big part of it for sure.
There was a large uptick in random family members congratulating
Always,
me. Yeah.
always.
There
yes.
are still the news networks. I won't name any names, but you'll see reports of them talking about Bitcoin and then talking about meme coins, kind of as if they're the same exact thing. So there still is a lack of knowledge with some about that.
Of course, nothing beats your beat reporting from the crypto industry. Of course, both Casey and Ben, the Forward Guidance newsletter. You can go to blockworks.co/newsletters. I think that's going to be it for this news roundup. Any final thoughts as we sit here in Digital Asset Summit, Ben, Casey?
No, just excited to keep hearing from people. Plenty of politicians and big banks, like you mentioned. So we're just trying to get as much of the scoop as we can, and yeah.
I'm excited to watch you interview Sailor.
Oh, yeah.
That'll be a good...
And it'll be on YouTube. If you're following us there, smash that like and subscribe button. If you're watching on X, give us a like or a comment. We'll be back next time. You can find this on wherever you get Blockworks podcasts. This has been Supply Shock.